Warning. This video discusses both fascism and murder, so if this is something you're sensitive to, please just be cognizant of that before continuing. Part 1. Cycles. Have you ever seen anyone try to draw a perfect circle? Or, more importantly, have you ever seen anyone almost get it right? It's beautiful in a way. We want to believe the circle is perfect, but we know it isn't. It can't be. There are no examples of perfect circles in all of recorded history, and a random 17-second clip found on YouTube.com is not going to offer the literal infinite number of points required to create a perfect circle. One could try for the rest of their life, but we can say with almost absolute certainty they wouldn't even come close to drawing the elusive shape. There's something oddly human about pursuing perfect circles. The history of this chase extends back to the ancient Greeks with Plato's Timaeus. Plato contends that the universe is a sphere, and true movement in the universe takes place at uniform speeds in perfect circles. Anything less could not possibly be true. There's no variation, everything is planned and exact. We've spent thousands of years pursuing the shape and seeing its shadow hidden in the corners of life, but it manages to evade us time and time again. It feels like a hopeless pursuit, but we keep throwing ourselves at the task, trying to find the shape in the world around us. Nature, despite its lack of perfect circles, does seem to favor the pursuit of the shape. It does not manifest itself in the form of a mineral or a perfectly shaped leaf, but rather in the cycles we live through. One is born, one lives, one dies. Once one is dead, their body contributes to the life of another, who will live before they die, and the cycle continues on into the great nothingness of the future. It is a never-ending roll into the unknown, a perfect circle that cannot be broken and cannot be subverted. This is the premise of W.B. Yeats's Purgatory. The short 1938 play follows a father and son trapped in a cycle of decline, murder, sex, and guilt, seemingly destined to have the same situations play out. The old man and the boy, they are not given the dignity of real names, are reflections of one another. At the age of 16, the old man used a knife to murder his father before raising his bastard son, and his son, unwittingly, looks to repeat this cycle by threatening to murder the old man with the same knife. But things take a turn for the stranger. While the man and his son are arguing, a ghostly figure, none other than the old man's mother, appears in the window of the house they are situated next to. It is revealed that this is the old man's childhood home, and his mother's ghost is re-experiencing the night of the old man's conception, forced to repeat this night every year, living through the experiences that have led to the events of the play. She cannot escape, she is in her purgatory, and the old man is unable to do anything to stop it. Of course, that doesn't stop him from trying. He is sent into a flurry of emotions, and, in his anger, he brutally murders his son in an attempt to break the cycle he sees playing out before him. This, unsurprisingly, does nothing to save his mother, and the play closes with the sound of hoofbeats from his father's ghostly steed approaching. With this work, Yeats takes a new perspective on the perfect circle that is the cycle of life. In this work, it is not beautiful. On the contrary, the cycle is the purgatory to which the show owes its name. Neither heaven nor hell, purgatory is the torturous space between. When speaking about purgatory, the Catechism, a text that acts as a summation of Catholic beliefs, says, "All who die in God's grace and friendship, but still imperfectly purified, are indeed assured of their eternal salvation. But, after death, they undergo purification so as to achieve the holiness necessary to enter the joy of heaven." But, in this case, there's an issue with this definition. Namely, the issue is that the Catechism did not exist until 1992. 54 years after Yeats wrote this work. He made purgatory into something different from how it is now perceived, falling back upon the ideals of cycles and circles. Yeats's purgatory is not a positive one. It is the dreadful repetition of human mistakes and fallibilities. The old man's mother is doomed to relive her earthly mistakes, fortunate enough to have avoided eternal damnation, but made to pay for her sins. She is not relegated to the depths of hell, but she will never be free of the mistakes she made in her life. Part 2. Politics. It is important to recognize that this work is not separate and cannot be separated from the political implications of the time. To ignore Yeats's political beliefs is to miss much of the play, so one must contend with how his ideas are presented. The old man's childhood home, now destitute and abandoned, once housed magistrates, colonels, members of parliament, captains, governors, and long ago, men that had fought at Aughrim and the Boyne, a clear reference to the history of Ireland's ruling class. As the cycle of Ireland continued on, the country and the role of the elites in society changed, and Yeats believed it was for the worse. We cannot answer on Yeats's political beliefs, however detestable they may be. Yeats was sympathetic to the Blueshirts, a quasi-fascist Irish political organization. They played heavily into the nationalistic aspect of their despicable beliefs, but this likely had a decent impact on Yeats's work. It is impossible to read this play and separate it from its historical context. Doing so would create a wholly different work, one that touches upon cycles without the bite of quasi-fascism to bolster its claim. Purgatory is related to the horrors of fascism. To Yeats, this deplorable belief system was a kind of elixir from the fountain of youth, the only thing that could save Ireland from its decline and eventual death. Perhaps that is why death is such a focal point of the work. Yeats thought his nation was dying, so the cycle he wrote homed in on the death he perceived. He knew that time rolled on and the cycles would continue. That did not mean they must continue with Ireland still in tow. In his attempt to rationalize the fate and future of his family, the old man looks to the past and explores one of the most troubling aspects of the work, an impressive feat considering the topic of the play. He ventures into the territory of blood purity, explaining the decline of the house as the result of his mother's poor decision to have a relationship with a man below her status. To him, his mother's mistake of mingling with the lower class was a deadly one. This idea is awful, but it is as tied to the concept of cycles as every other part of the work. Until the addition of the old man's father and the breaking away from tradition and class, the house was thriving, but as soon as the cycle was broken away from, issues began to arise. To Yeats, the cycle of the past was a positive, showing a clear divergence from the new cycle of their current lives. The past was strong, and the future was bleak. Part 3. Fear. Yeats knew he could not conquer the cycles. Like the old man, he was unable to break the cycle he perceived, no matter how hard he tried. The political future of Ireland was out of his hands. Like the cycles seen in nature, Ireland's path could not be stopped by any one individual. Yeats was forced to merely sit by and view what he believed to be a decline, unable to do anything as he perceived hoofbeats in the distance. In Purgatory, he looks to emphasize the lack of power we have over the cycles of life. The only cycle that is meaningfully broken and changed by the plot of the play is the cycle of patricide, but it's only replaced with the similarly cruel act of filicide. One can, in theory, change the cycle of death by determining the order in which we die, but regardless, death still comes. Luckily for us, schools of philosophy have been contending with this fear of cycles and changes for millennia. The ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi reflected on the death of his first wife, and, after giving it thorough thought, he realized mourning her death was pointless. He saw that this was another step in the cycle of life, an undeniable reality of existing in this mortal realm. We did not choose this cycle, but it is our burden to bear. This is the strongest argument against the fears Yeats presents in this work. Cycles are an inherent part of existence, a foundational aspect of nature, and are fully value neutral. We are all like the old man. Try as we might, we cannot break some cycles, and they are bound to continue. If we can recognize this reality and embrace it, our fears lose much of their power. After all, isn't that everything Yeats is talking about in Purgatory? It's all about fear. From its politics to the powerlessness, every aspect of this play focuses in on it. It is the fear we harbor when facing the cycles we cannot control and a future that is out of our hands. We want to control our futures. We want to be autonomous, but some facets of life cannot be beaten. It shaped his politics, and it shaped this work. The unknown can be frightening, especially when there is little that can be done to stop it, but we cannot risk following Yeats's path. We must look at the cycles around us, recognize that some of them can and should change, and push for that change as best we can. We must not be driven by fear of the unknown. We must embrace it as an inherent part of life. The unknown can terrify us, but we cannot fall back to the past as Yeats did. Yeats may have thought the blue shirts had the best intentions for Ireland, but that does not make his ideology in any way immoral. The old man may have thought that killing his son would free his mother, but that does not make his murderous act permissible. We as people must recognize that perfect circles are in every cycle that make up our world. That is the only way we can free ourselves from falling into the trap of endless purgatories.